All right, diving right in to another deep dive with you. Today we're looking at TikTok bans,
hmm
specifically how different countries are dealing with like all the concerns around the app, right?
Yeah.
We've got two pretty interesting articles for this one. One from Zatica. It's a Spanish tech site.
Okay.
They're highlighting what Canada just did. And then we've got one from Euronews that focuses on like TikTok's legal battle in the US. So kind of two different approaches, right?
Yeah, it's becoming pretty obvious that governments everywhere are kind of wrestling with how to deal with TikTok.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that they're all over the place. There's
Right.
no one solution.
Right, exactly. It's not like everybody's on the same page, right? Like Canada, for example, what
Yeah.
Zach is calling this, like stealth ban.
Right.
They've basically told TikTok Canada, you can't operate here,
Yeah.
but Canadians can still use the app. It's kind of a weird situation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like a compromise on the surface. Right?
Yeah.
Address the security concerns without really directly impacting users.
Right.
But then that just brings up like a whole bunch of other questions, right? Like
Yeah.
how effective is that really going to be?
Exactly. Like, is that really going to stop data from going back to ByteDance? And like,
Yeah.
what does TikTok even think about all this?
Well, I mean, their statement was pretty direct. They said, and this is a quote, "Closing TikTok's Canadian offices and destroying hundreds of well-paying local jobs is in no one's best interest.
Oh, wow.
And the shutdown order will do just that. We will challenge this order in court."
So they're not messing around.
Yeah, you're not happy.
No, not at all. Yeah. So what was the thing that pushed Canada to do this?
So the main thing was this report that came out from CSIS,
Okay.
Canada's intelligence service. And they were basically highlighting that, there is potential for the data that TikTok collects to be accessed by the Chinese government,
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
which is it's a concern for anybody, but particularly when you're talking about younger users.
Right.
Right.
So that was definitely a catalyst for this.
Okay, so Canada's not the only one, right? Like
Mhm.
worried about this data security stuff.
Oh, absolutely not. This is like front and center of every conversation about TikTok globally.
Yeah.
And the Euronews article gives us some insight into, how different places are reacting. Like India,
Right.
they've just banned it outright, completely.
Yeah.
The US, they're trying to force a sale to an American company.
Yeah.
They've got a deadline, middle of January 2025.
Wow. So there's like a ticking time bomb there.
Yeah, and then you've got European regulators. They're starting to look into it more closely, too.
So everyone's it's almost like a chess game.
Yeah,
Globally, everybody's trying to figure out what the next move is.
it is. But at the heart of it is that same concern, right?
Yeah.
Is the Chinese government going to somehow, like, leverage user data through TikTok?
Right.
And in Canada, the CSIS director, David Vignal, he was pretty straight up.
He said that, that TikTok data is, in fact, available to the Chinese government. And that, creates a way that they could manipulate things.
Okay, that's a big statement.
Yeah.
But of course, TikTok is completely denying that they're sharing any data with the Chinese government, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're very firm on that point. They're
Yeah.
like, no, user data is protected. We're not, being influenced in that way.
Right, right. It's so interesting how this whole debate's playing out on all these different levels,
Yeah.
Like you have the government policies, you have the legal battles, you have the company statements.
Right.
It feels like TikTok is just like getting hit from every direction.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a multifaceted challenge for sure.
Yeah.
And that's really what makes this deep dive so interesting.
Right.
We're getting into something that has really high stakes,
Yeah.
complex technical stuff to consider,
Yeah.
and it could have like really big consequences. So,
It could change a lot of things.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of high stakes,
Mhm.
let's move over to the US, where TikTok's parent company, ByteDance,
Right.
they're in a legal battle over this whole forced sale thing.
Mm-hmm.
What are the like main arguments that are happening there?
So ByteDance is basically saying that this U.S. law that's forcing the sale is unconstitutional.
Right.
It's like they're going too far, and it sets this dangerous precedent,
Yeah.
for online platforms.
Right.
And don't forget, TikTok has a massive user base in the U.S., like 170 million people.
That's huge.
That's a big chunk of the adult population. So
Yeah. Yeah.
their argument is that,
That's a lot of people to potentially be impacted by this.
right, yeah, and their legal filing, they don't hold back at all.
Okay.
They call the law unconstitutional. They're saying that there's no way they can do this sale in the time they've been given.
Oh, wow.
And they even suggest that the people who sponsored this law, they don't even see it as a ban.
Really?
It's more about controlling
Yeah.
who owns TikTok. So, yeah, I mean, it's really highlighting the...
It's a power struggle in a way.
It is, yeah. It's like, how do you balance national security
Yeah.
with, people being able to do business freely?
Right, right.
So it's a really complicated legal fight that could have big implications for how governments regulate online platforms in the future.
Okay, so this case in the U.S. could change things for everybody.
Good, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty significant. It's interesting, right, this whole trend,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not just about outright bans.
Right.
Like, you see all these countries and institutions that are banning TikTok from government devices, like
Right.
Australia, Estonia, the UK, France,
Mm-hmm.
the Netherlands, Norway, Belgium, Denmark,
Yeah.
even EU institutions. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like everybody's kind of like
Right.
taking a step back and being like, wait a second.
Yeah, like maybe there's something here.
Yeah, maybe we should rethink this a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is Canada's like stealth ban a better alternative?
Mm-hmm.
Is it like the middle ground, or is it just like a temporary thing?
That's a good question.
That's what we're going to look at after the break.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
All right. Canada's approach is really interesting, right? Because instead of banning the app completely,
Right.
they're just targeting like TikTok's corporate structure.
Right.
So they're not going after the users.
Right.
They're trying to like disrupt the flow of data without making all the people who use the app mad.
Yeah, it sounds like they're trying to like have it both ways, you know. But can they really do that?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the Canadian government, they're hoping that by like going after TikTok Canada's operations,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to basically cut off how the data flows back to ByteDance.
Okay.
And then, ultimately the Chinese government.
Right.
But, only time will tell if that's really going to work to fix those security concerns,
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a gamble.
Yeah.
And a really complicated one. Because you have like the technical challenge of actually stopping that data.
Right.
And then you have the legal battle that TikTok said they're going to start.
Exactly.
But even if Canada like wins both of those things,
Yeah.
are they really solving the whole problem?
Yeah.
Because like Canadians can still use the app.
Mm-hmm.
So isn't their data still kind of vulnerable in theory?
That's a good point. And it's definitely something that people who don't like the ban have brought up, for sure.
Okay.
Like TikTok could find ways to get around it,
Right.
route the data differently
Yeah.
or, use their global network somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a fluid situation. And I think both sides are going to be like constantly adapting
Okay.
to whatever the other one does.
Just like a game of cat and mouse almost.
Kinda, yeah. But, even beyond all the technical details of who can access the data,
Mm-hmm.
there's a bigger issue here, right?
Yeah.
It's about TikTok as a platform and,
Yeah.
whether it can be used to like influence people and manipulate them. And that's separate from whether individual users' data is actually being messed with.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So even if they stop the Chinese government from seeing my data,
Right.
they could still use the app to influence me in other ways.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. Even if the Chinese government isn't like looking at specific users' data,
Yeah.
what they show people, what they don't show people,
Right.
that can still have a huge impact on how people think, even on politics.
Right. Okay.
It's the algorithms, the trending hashtags, the promoted stuff.
Yeah.
All of that can be tweaked
Right.
to push certain narratives.
Okay. That's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is, yeah.
It's like even if we fix the data problem,
Right.
there's still this potential for TikTok to be used for bad stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's not just about like protecting my privacy.
Right.
It's about like the truth and democracy. you know?
Exactly. It's about making sure that information is accurate and that our democratic systems are like working the way they should.
And that's where the real dilemma is.
Yeah.
How do we protect ourselves
Right.
in this digital age without like resorting to censorship and shutting everything down?
Yeah. It feels like we're in totally new territory here.
We are.
And Canada's approach is
Mhm.
just another layer on top of all of this.
Right.
Is this something that other countries could do?
Mm-hmm.
Could this like start a new trend in how we regulate these platforms?
It could, yeah. If Canada's way of doing things works,
Mm-hmm.
or, even if it just kind of works,
Yeah.
we might see other countries trying the same thing.
Right.
So instead of these big dramatic bans, which are hard to do anyway,
Right.
you might see more targeted stuff
Yeah.
aimed at, like,
Yeah.
the companies, you know.
Right.
Tried to stop the data
Yeah.
and limit the influence without making all the users mad.
So instead of killing it, they're trying to tame it.
Yeah, kind of.
But then what happens to TikTok in the long run if this keeps happening?
Right.
Can it survive if every country has a different rule?
That's a really good point, and something that ByteDance has to be worried about.
Yeah.
Because if they can't operate in the big markets,
Mm-hmm.
if they can't make money,
Right.
if they can't come up with new ideas,
Yeah.
then the platform could just die.
Right.
It's like slowly cutting off its blood supply.
Yeah, it's slow death.
Yeah,
So the question is, can TikTok be flexible enough to survive this?
exactly. Yeah.
And it's not just governments they have to worry about, right?
Right.
Like the Euronews article talked about how companies and organizations...
They're banning TikTok from their devices too.
Right.
They're worried about the data and the security risks.
Right.
So it's not just like a government thing anymore.
Right.
Regular people are starting to get worried too.
Okay.
You know.
So maybe public opinion is shifting.
Yeah, it seems like it. I think people are starting to understand
Mm-hmm.
that what they do online matters,
Right.
and they're starting to ask for more transparency.
Yeah.
And accountability from the apps and websites they use.
Yeah, it's like this whole conversation.
Yeah.
It's a wake-up call, you know?
It is.
Not just about TikTok, but about our whole digital lives.
Right.
We're giving these platforms so much information about ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to be more careful.
Exactly. We can't just click agree without thinking about it.
Yeah.
We have to be informed.
Right.
We have to demand better from these
Yep.
companies.
Yeah, it's like we're citizens in this digital world, too.
We are, yeah.
And we have rights.
Exactly.
This deep dive into TikTok bans has been really eye-opening.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's shown us how complicated things are
Yeah,
for governments and for regular people like us.
for sure.
We talked about Canada's approach,
Mm-hmm.
the legal fight in the U.S.,
Right.
and this whole global movement
Mm-hmm.
of governments and organizations trying to limit TikTok.
Yeah, it's a constantly changing landscape,
Right.
but it's something we all need to pay attention to.
Or-
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
we've only just scratched the surface here,
Yeah.
and the debate is definitely not over.
Right.
But if we keep talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
raising awareness, demanding better,
Yeah.
then we can work together to make the digital world a better place.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's not hopeless.
No, not at all.
Mm.
As long as we stay informed,
Right.
engage, and keep pushing for better,
Mm-hmm.
then we can shape the digital world into something we actually want.
Yeah, that's powerful. It's like we have more control than we think.
Exactly.
So, to wrap things up, what are your thoughts on all of this? What do you think is the best way for governments to handle these challenges? There's no easy answer, but it's something we all need to think about.
It really is. And it's something that we all need to be part of
Yeah.
figuring out.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because you have to balance those security worries, data privacy, and like potential for other countries to mess with things.
Yeah.
But then you have all these users
Right.
who love TikTok. They use it for creative stuff to connect with people.
Even to make money.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
It is. So where do you even start?
Right. It feels like a huge mess.
Yeah, I think the first thing is you got to admit that both sides have valid points.
Okay.
We can't ignore the security stuff,
Right.
but we also can't ignore what will happen to users and the platform if we clamp down too hard.
Right. So it's not about picking a winner.
Exactly.
It's about figuring out a solution that works for everyone.
Yeah, finding that middle ground
Yeah.
where security and freedom can both exist online.
Okay, but how do we get there? It just seems so complicated.
Well, I think it starts with talking,
Okay.
open and honest dialogue between governments, these tech companies, and the people who use the apps.
Okay.
We got to stop pointing fingers and actually work together.
Right.
More understanding, more transparency.
So less fighting, more talking. But can they actually agree on anything?
It's tough, but I think so.
Okay.
We've seen it before with data privacy laws, you know.
Right.
The tech companies push back at first,
Mm.
but they ended up working with governments
Yeah.
to create rules that protect users without killing innovation.
Okay. So there's hope.
Yeah, we can find that middle ground.
So how would that work with TikTok?
Well, you'd have to have everyone be upfront about what data they're collecting, how they're using it, what they're doing to prevent abuse.
Right.
And you have to talk about how restrictions would affect the users and TikTok itself.
Right.
What are the unintended consequences? Can we minimize the damage?
So many things to consider.
Yeah, it's a balancing act.
Right.
Security versus freedom, economic factors, and what it all means for the digital world. It is, and remember, it's not just governments and these companies.
Right.
Users got to be part of the conversation too.
So, like, being informed, making smart choices about what we share,
Yeah.
holding everyone accountable.
Exactly. We're not just along for the ride.
Right.
We have to speak up, demand transparency, and push for a better digital future.
We have to take charge.
Exactly. It's a team effort.
Right.
Governments, companies, and users all working together to create a digital world that's secure, free, innovative, and responsible.
That's a great goal.
It is.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into this whole TikTok ban situation.
Yeah, it's been a good one.
Hopefully everyone listening has a better grasp on the challenges we're all facing
Definitely.
as we navigate this crazy digital world.
Absolutely. And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see everyone next time for another deep dive.